Hello and welcome back to the Truth of Grief podcast. Thank you for joining us for episode 2. Hope you enjoyed the first episode. If this is the first one you've seen, go back and watch that one. We go into a bit more detail of what this podcast is and what we are going to be doing. But for episode 2, we are going to start with Nellie's Journey. And I guess the first question is, who's Nellie?
Who is Nellie? So, I know Lauren was screaming at me in my ear somewhere, making sure I get all the details correct. But so Nellie is my firstborn daughter, born on the 15th of December, born at £7 15 ounces, a perfect weight, some would say. There's never a right time to have a child. Everyone always waits until the right time, but at that particular time, I think we was doing our house up. And me and Lauren were quite fresh into our relationship. And it kind of fell into place, really. We had a dog. So it was the next piece of the puzzle. And it suited us when she came along. That's Nellie.
That's Nellie.
The perfect present.
So that's Nellie. And we started this podcast, we're saying this is about Nellie's journey.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you tell us about that?
So at around 6 months old, she began to not be herself. She had quite a hard belly. She had runny poops. She wasn't sleeping. She seemed to, if she was to doze off, sort of jolt and wake herself up. And Lauren, more than anyone, Mum, knew straight away that something wasn't right. Something was off. Me being typical dad, I'm sure she's fine. Let's just do the normal things of, I don't know, beyond taking her to the doctors. Let's just see how it goes. Like, she seems okay in herself, but obviously Mum knows best. So yeah, went up to the doctors, who at first examined the liver as inflamed, and referred us to go up to the hospital and get double checked. So obviously this is the prime of COVID. I think it was actually just at the start. So I think we were both allowed in, to which we spent a couple of days of getting some tests, because they knew that it wasn't something normal. And I think the worst thing about it all was there was a particular evening where it was around 9 or 10 at night. I think I was at home. Lauren was up the hospital, one parent up the hospital at a time. And a doctor had done some scans, said to Lauren that we think your daughter has a viral infection or could have cancer.
Right.
So Lauren obviously hysterically got on the phone to me, crying down the phone. This doctor basically dropped that bomb and then just gone about her rounds as if it was like nothing. So being left in the loop, or out the loop I should say, at 10 o'clock at night, she's had to sleep on that for the rest of the night. And across a couple of days of getting up the hospital, you could see Nellie's belly getting bigger and was looking a lot more uncomfortable, a lot more pale. Rash had sort of increased all over her body. And yeah, I think it was the next day they'd asked Lauren to call me and get me down the hospital, which was never good news. Brought to a side room and told that Nellie had 3 tumours, one on her kidney, one in her liver, and one on her adrenal gland, which is connected to the kidney. And they could tell that because of where the positions of them were, that it was most likely to be neuroblastoma. So I can remember being in the room, and I kind of, as soon as they sort of said that, I just kind of froze. I was just sat there trying to take in what I'd just been told, at the same time not really believing it. And I can remember Lauren kind of pacing around the room, screaming and obviously crying, and I was just sat there thinking, what on earth has just been told to us? Never in a million years sort of thought it would be that. Yeah, after a little while, made a few phone calls because we was being omitted or referred straight up to Gosh to sort of seek more specialist examination and help. And then that kind of kick-started the journey to Gosh, to then obviously find out what happens next.
So there's quite a lot to unpack there. You've gone through, I guess, the start of this journey that you went through with your family. With that first initial consultation, like how did that make you? As a parent myself, I can't imagine how that would feel. Like I can try, but I just don't know. But you say like you froze, and what was your automatic reaction to almost not believe it was happening, or?
Yeah, I sort of I haven't really told many people this, but I think at that point in my life, Nellie was 6 months old. I'd actually really struggled from when she was first born to connect with her, bond with her. I know that there's a certain word that dads might have towards a newborn, and other than probably Lauren and maybe my parents, I don't think anyone really knows that. And it was probably around that time when I think when dads experience that and their child obviously gets a bit older, starts smiling and laughing and starts interacting, it was at that point where I just kind of nailed it, like got around the idea of like getting close to her, and then to hear that news, I was like double hit almost, which entailed probably extends to the whole journey, and the fact that from the start it was so much it was so hard personally for myself, because I didn't have that connection with her at the start. So as that grew and finally got there, to then be told that, and I'm quite a positive person, whereas Lauren isn't. She always looks at the worst of things. So that was kind of the start of the whole ordeal, really. And yeah, so at that moment, I can remember just sitting there and kind of trying to understand what they'd said.
Do you think they delivered that news in the right way? Do you think that helped? Like,
no.
Is there more?
I think that where there was partly a bit of anger, because as well as obviously in COVID, one parent could be at the hospital at a time. Lauren, who suffers from her own mental health, has had this bombshell dropped on her that it could be a viral infection, which is probably something that could be treated with antibiotics, or she might have some tumours, or she might have cancer. It's personally, I think that's I'm going to say the word wrong.
Was there no help from the NHS in any way? Like, you've just been given this information and all right, okay, you got to go up to Gosh. Was there anything other than medical attention for Nellie? Was there any support for you and Lauren just been given this news, like young parents?
Yeah, I can only imagine that maybe they were dealing with more important things such as the COVID and the national crisis that we had going on at the time. So as well as I'm pissed off that, Lauren was probably 20, 23, 24 at the time. And I might even be doing that injustice. She might have been a bit younger. She's up there on her own in the hospital and just been told that news. And it's kind of like, right, good night. See you tomorrow and we'll tell you a bit more. It was wrong. It was not in my eyes. It was very bad. And then, having slept on that, obviously not sleeping on that. Next day, side room, quiet room, and then told that we needed to go to Gosh, and then that's a whole.
Did you go? Did they send you straight to Great Ormond Street, or?
Yeah, so they organised ambulance ride up there. I think it was probably about 10, 11 in the morning. I'd sort of I'd rang me dad to let him know that this was happening, and my business partner at the time, because obviously it was a weekday, and as silly as it sounds now, like I've still got responsibilities of that. I can't just go cold turkey and quiet. I had to make sure that was sorted. So then we head up to Gosh. So Gosh, we got there, to which the only thing I knew about Gosh was what you see on the news of as weird as it sounds, like the Disneyland kind of place of sick children, kind of celebrities in and out, and a constant sort of flow of probably presents and stuff like that. To get up there was a totally different experience to what I'd imagined it would be. So
it's not what you see on TV or online.
I imagine it is normally, but even now I know people that are up there, and it will never probably be the same because of COVID. So you get to the front door and there's security there, only allowing one parent in with the sick child, compared to where they would normally have 5, 10. A lot of cultures have huge families around their children that might be in the hospitals. And we got there, and because we were fresh and new, they let me and Lauren both in, to then obviously start the diagnosis for Nellie. But it was a ghost town. It was, you got canteens with no one in them, outdoor areas closed off for the children, playrooms in the hallways of each ward closed off because of the contamination of toys and things like that, closed. All the nurses had masks on, so you only really communicated with them, obviously, through kind of what they look like from their eyes, and obviously trying to work out who said what with a mask over their face.
So this was the first summer of COVID, right? So this was the first three or 4 months in.
Oh, and even you just saying that, I can remember getting to the room and exactly that. Summer, boiling hot, no aircon and ventilation because of the contamination spread. So you're like dangling yourself out of a little like gap window to like get some fresh air and try and, fans going all the time within your rooms. But yeah, I could go on and on with certain aspects of it. Like, don't get me wrong, Gosh had certain protocols that had to be followed, and there's a reason for it. It's not a slate. I'm not against why they were there, but it was one thing, bad timing, I guess. But as soon as we got there, put in our room, it was like a prison. It was, you can't leave the room, and you got to stay there. That's it. So,
had they confirmed the diagnosis before you got there, or was this the start of them going, right, what?
So it was the start. So they confirmed and did some tests themselves that she had tumours, to then put her on a sort of basic dose of chemo straight away, because at this time each day her belly was getting bigger and bigger, and for a little 6-month-old diddy baby that she was, her stomach, it looked like she had a basketball in her stomach. And still smiling, Like it was that's the only real thing I think that got us through it. The fact that she's oblivious, she's still smiling, can't necessarily roll over or get comfortable because she's got this big belly. But other than that, she's smiling and happy and laughing, and that fortunately is something that did get us through. So then they started her on a basic dose of chemo, and then after some more tests and scans, again we was pulled to a side room, and again side rooms are never nice for people that have experienced them. You kind of know that there's no good news to come out of them.
Yeah.
And it was after some more scans that she'd had. I'm gonna have to look at exactly what her diagnosis was so I don't get it wrong. So pardon for me looking across. So she was basically diagnosed with neuroblastoma stage 4, MYCN amplified, with the ALK mutation, which to me meant gibberish. Lauren had already started Googling it, and she knew straight away that that's not good.
Yeah.
That's kind of the worst kind of neuroblastoma diagnosis that you can have. And at the time, they'd told us that we have a treatment plan in place, and we feel that her chances of survival are at this time 50%. Lauren knew from the research that she'd done as a internet doctor, the chances of that probably should have been more about 20%.
Right.
I think the 50% was probably for the hope, to which, to my own detriment, I kind of held on to. So positive me kind of saw that 50% as hope, and she just knew that in her heart, and having spoken already in this time of cases of neuroblastoma, that she wasn't going to make it.
With yourself and Lauren kind of taking two different routes with your outlook on it, how did that affect you both? Because I can imagine, like you say, Lauren.
Oh yeah.
She I've known Lauren. I've met her many times, and she obviously, I can tell now, she probably would have been on researching this 24/7, any waking point. And then knowing yourself as well, you're probably like, I don't want to know. I just want to try and get through this. So how did that?
That sums it up, because I look back now and I think, albeit I might have done a bit of research and things, I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like, obviously at the time, I've got my own business and it's growing, and I've got responsibilities, and I look back now and I feel that, could I have done more? Maybe, with regards to making myself more knowledgeable and educated.
But do you think that would have changed anything in that process? Because I'm very aware, like, I don't think you should probably look back in regret, because hindsight is a wonderful thing, right? But what difference would that have made to you, to Lauren, to anyone involved?
I'll tell you what, it would have probably made me a bit more of a level thinking with Lauren, because Lauren already had fixated, she's not going to make it. Like this diagnosis, even if she gets through the treatment, which was chemotherapy, immunotherapy, surgery, radiation, and then even if she got through all of that, the chances of relapsing with neuroblastoma were almost like, I don't know, 95%, if not 100%.
Yeah.
There's people that get diagnosis, do the treatment, and relapse, not necessarily straight away, 10, 15, 20 years later, and it kind of always finds you. So definitely me being that positive guy of, come on, babe, like there's 50% chance you'll make this, you're strong, and especially as the treatment started and she bossed it, I still had that, like, she's doing so well. And she just saw it as like false hope. She just knew. And I think maybe if I made myself more educated with that, it might have dumbed down my positiveness, understood why she probably wasn't, and then maybe I would have, I don't know, acted differently throughout her journey, which
I can imagine it probably maybe caused quite a lot of tension between the two of you. I mean, let's face it, you're talking about a situation that no parent would ever want to be in for obvious reasons. And I don't think anyone can blame any parent for not communicating or not being themselves or acting how they usually would. But do you think that brought you closer, or as a couple, or do you think that was pushing you apart?
I think it probably pushed us apart in certain aspects where probably Lauren, because of giving up work for her from paternity leave, maternity leave, she had Nellie, full-time mum, and then it was almost like she was going to get back into work, and then this happened. So she was full focus Nellie. Whereas obviously, like I said, I had other things. So maybe in her mind, it was, how can you not be making this your number one priority? Which I felt I was in my own way, but also we all had COVID to deal with. So I think the biggest problem that we had was the fact that very soon after being told that diagnosis and the treatment plan, and we've got 8 rounds of chemo before you get near to the surgery and things like that, it was, really sorry, but we have hospital rules and one of you needs to go home. And then you're then like, right, now what? So that was the biggest problem. Like, don't get me wrong, we live in Essex, right down by the seafront, and we've got to come to London. And I think there's such a heavy weight it puts on one parent being stuck in that room, not being able to talk to any other parents, and all you can do is, I don't know, if you go to the toilet, is wave through a window at other people. It was tough. It was tough. Lauren did that first sort of stint, and I think in the most sanest way, she was broke after a very short amount of time. And then we had to keep swapping. You couldn't lean on anyone else because of COVID, bringing it in, out, doing the COVID tests. So it was solely parents. So grandparents and siblings and people that you rely upon for babysitting, purely parents. So yeah, I have many personal regrets of almost not just dropping my life, my work, and solely being there for Lauren and Nellie. At the same time, you've got a house and you've got a dog, and you've got to maintain and keep, I don't know, your home life, which I was still trying to support. So yeah, it really took a toll. Really took a toll.
I mean, it's not something that you can really prepare for, right? I mean, I think whatever way that you would have went with it, it's not an easy time. With the being in the COVID period, obviously that probably emphasised the struggle it was. You say, like, obviously you was relaying back and forth with Lauren. So did that mean that you didn't, as a result of the situation, did that mean you didn't really get much time with Lauren? Because I'd imagine if it's one parent in, one parent out.
None. None.
For how
Other
long?
than weeks. And it probably stemmed into only doing the swap over, to which you had to do outside. So if I pulled up outside, she'd have to come out, and so if someone dropped me off, she'd have to come outside, leave Nellie with a nurse, and then I have to go in. Other than the exchange of hello, how are you, quick 2 minutes, back in there again, see you again, maybe in 3-4 days. So there was none. So yeah, our as strong as we were trying to be for Nellie and ourselves to do it, as a relationship, it broke us. Not just Gosh and Nellie, like the COVID and the one parent rule. Yeah, it really broke us.
You said you're doing 3 or 4 day stints at a time, so you'd live in Gosh for 4 days with Nellie, with no one else around.
Yeah, you'd almost try and do as long as you can, before someone has a little mini meltdown, basically. Like, it just gets to a point where, particularly with and other parents might resonate with this if they've been up to Gosh and maybe had similar scenarios, where you almost try and get the routine to make it as easy as you can for yourself. So you'd be in there and you'd finally get your child off to sleep. Bear in mind, that is a task in its own. White noise may be blaring and like rocking the bed, and then a cleaner comes in, completely harmless, doing his innocent job, and then bang on the door, bins, changing the changing the bags in the bins, and you're just like so innocent, but at the same time, the smallest thing sets you off, and then the child wakes up, and you spend the next half an hour boiling hot, sweating, trying to get your ill child back to sleep, because that's the only real time you can kind of have to yourself, selfishly, to like just collect yourself. So she was of an age that would take naps, and she was a good night sleeper. But there was older children in there who would be awake all day, I assume, and you got to try and entertain them whilst being provided a handful of toys from the play team, because you weren't allowed in the playroom, to try and keep yourself occupied. There's a story I didn't tell, actually, which was the first day that we arrived at Gosh, and we'd just been pushed into our room, and sort of realised that this was kind of our life for the next however long, months, weeks, and we heard this child screaming, next door to us, screaming, "Oh, I don't want to die, help me, Mum!" And me and Lauren look at each other like, "Oh my God, like, what's going on?" Bear in mind, you kind of already felt on edge, shattered. And then hearing that, you're like, "Oh my God, is this what we're going to have moving forward?" And it was only the next day, went and spoke to Lauren to sort of find out how her night was. And she said, like, that boy was doing it quite into the night, screaming, "Help me, I don't want to die. Ah." And it was only just before I got into the room that a nurse had told Lauren, or Lauren asked this nurse, like, "Is that boy okay next door? Like, what's going on?" And she said, "Oh yeah, him. Oh, he's fine. He's playing Fortnite."
Oh my God.
So, I think the relief hit us that he's just playing Fortnite. "Oh, I don't want to die." And we thought he's like screaming out in pain, and that was our first experience of being in Gosh.
Oh my God.
And that just brought the slightest little bit of dark humour, I guess, to the situation. But yeah, that was.
I mean, that was a twist I was not expecting.
Yeah, I suppose not a lot of people are going to be expecting that. But
No.
but if you don't laugh, then then you'd probably cry. So
Yeah. So I guess that's your introduction to Gosh. What after this was all confirmed and the diagnosis was given to you, you mentioned that she went on to chemotherapy. What was that the first thing that they went to, or was there other treatments? Because I know you mentioned there's surgeries involved as well.
Yeah, so when they diagnosed her, they kind of knew specifically what type of chemotherapy to basically use.
So there's different types of chemo.
Different types of chemo. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that if they can confirm there's tumours and they have to obviously act on them to try and still them, like make them sort of just hold fire for a minute, there's kind of a basic chemo that they can give just to get it going whilst they're doing all the tests to specifically diagnose that patient. So she'd had them as soon as we arrived, because they managed to obviously do their own tests and tell you that it is. They have to do a little, not swab,
Biopsy.
A little biopsy, which then tells you exactly what the tumour is. So when they knew what it was, they basically had a treatment plan in place, which was 8 rounds of chemo or more if needed. And they're kind of spaced out. So it's not all 8 days in a row. It might be like every 4 or 5 days. And if they were from the start reacting well, there'd be a chance that you can go home in between and come back, stay in there for a week or two, because obviously the reaction or something could happen whilst you're having it, and you need to make sure that they haven't got a temperature whilst they're having it. They need to be ready for it, and that's where Nellie bossed her treatment. She had 8 rounds of chemo, was barely ever sick. She was happy as anything, and we had very positive news at the end of it, which would the 3 tumours overall had reduced by about 70%.
Okay.
So her tiny little body had these huge tumours, and seeing the scan afterwards of them, all 3 of them reduced, was fantastic news. It was one thing, fantastic. And then we could move on to surgery. So the surgery was to remove, I think, the largest tumour on her kidney, and was told that they might have to remove the kidney if they couldn't salvage it. And again, that was probably, I would say, leading up to that and the day of the surgery, probably one of the hardest moments I've ever had to date. It was one, taking your child down to have surgery, and albeit for certain scans and things, when they put them under, you're kind of comforting them. Or in some cases, because she was so small, I had to like cradle her and feel that feeling of the whole of her body just collapsing is it makes me feel sick. I think I was sick a couple of times, just holding your child who's wriggling around, smiling, having the gas mask or an injection to put them under, and just feeling them go limp. Like, just thinking of it now just makes me a bit sick. And by sick, not because of necessarily what they're doing, but just the feeling of it.
Yeah.
And it was horrific. Wouldn't recommend it for anyone. And then also knowing that she's going to a surgery, and touch wood, I've never really been involved in hospitals and people having procedures and surgery. So knowing that she's going for a procedure and she might not make it, it was kind of like on edge. You're just on edge the whole time. So yeah, that was one of the hardest, and to that date, that was the hardest sort of moment that I'd felt. And she bossed the surgery, and the surgeon came up, gave us the good news that she managed to remove 100% of that tumour, saving her kidney. And I think we had that just after she had the surgery, just after Christmas and her birthday, where we managed to get her home after bossing that chemotherapy. So we were on cloud nine. We were happy. Like
You had your kid home.
Well, I was. She's bossing it. Chemotherapy, surgery successful. Lauren obviously saw it differently still. If not, she'll tell you one day herself. And I think she is interested in potentially coming on the sofa in the future. She might turn around and say, like, actually, I had myself a little bit of hope at one point, but she might tell you not. It's for her to tell you.
So what you said there was 3 tumours and they removed the largest one. What did they do with the other 2 tumours?
So they had, I think, reduced a lot in size, where obviously the further treatments that you'd have, like radiation and immunotherapy and potentially any further chemotherapy, should wipe them out. Mm-hmm. Because of her age, we would have had to wait a little bit longer for her to have radiotherapy. I think they don't do it under 2-year-olds.
Okay.
So we had the surgery, was all happy, and we managed to get her home, and we was, in a really good place. We was in a good place.
You felt like you kind of had your family back home with the dog, back in not a hospital bed. So they sent you home from Great Ormond Street, and you mentioned that she had her feeding tubes and various other things. So what was the plan from there onwards? Like what was the next steps at that point?
So the next steps at that point was probably keeping her alive, to the extent of sometimes her platelet levels might drop, where she'd need a platelet infusion. So we had to have, throughout her treatment, trips up to our local hospital, having a top off of platelet levels and sometimes blood. That was kind of a certain points of her journey. It'd be more regular. Mm-hmm. And I would say even that has its own trauma, using a sort of your local hospital sometimes.
So you went to the local instead of Great Ormond Street for that?
Sometimes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so sometimes, simple, what would feel like simple infusions, you would go to your local hospital. But, and I know that certain people listening will definitely resonate with this, they don't probably have as much care or expertise as your GOSH or specialist hospitals. So Lauren had a scenario where we had Nellie getting a simple infusion of platelet levels, and where she had they call it wiggles, like a wiggles, where it's basically a direct line into the blood system. Mm-hmm. That's on the chest. They're supposed to sort of draw it for blood, make sure it's obviously clean line and stuff like that. And I think she had a situation where she was hooked up to a pump with a full line of air, and luckily the nurse overseeing this like trainee doing it came in and stopped her. Otherwise she would have dead. She was dead. If she'd hit the button to start the air, a full line, like 3-meter line of air pumped into her body would have ended her. And it was simple, small human mistakes like that which happen, and I've spoken to so many people, it feels avoidable. It's never going to be avoidable. It's human error. Is it poor training? Is it lack of funding? It's things like that. We're on cloud 9 at home. She's just bossed chemo, surgery. We go for a simple infusion, and she could have had her life ended there and then. And
How did you react to that? Because
Lauren was actually doing it, and she obviously was in the room, and she would kind of, again, a routine infusion. She was kind of like not paying attention to it,
yeah.
you know. So as much as, you know, we all love NHS and the what they provide for us, I would definitely recommend, in the nicest way possible, people making sure that they are observant of what's going on, because there is human error, which we need to try and reduce. We need to avoid as much as possible, and that was a certain situation that was avoidable.
I think this is going down a path of. I mean, I can even relate to something there with the birth of my first child, and there were problems due to human situations, but that was more down to lack of staff. So during the birth, then in our notes, I think it was written 7 times, like, cannot proceed due to no staffing. Do you think that has a play in it? Because, I mean, everyone says, like, when it comes to the NHS, it's not. I'm not educated, and I don't know enough about this to comment about it. It's just something that's always sort of said, is that they're understaffed, overworked. Because when I was with that first pregnancy, the birth that we had, I was angry at that situation. But at the same time, part of me was almost sympathetic to them, because I wanted to be angry at them and have a go at them.
Yeah.
But then you can see, I mean, we was on the ward with 7 other mothers, and 1 midwife, and things like that are going to cause human error more and more. So do you think that?
I suppose it's all right whilst everything's going all right. It's when it goes wrong, which is then maybe your view and my view would be very different.
Yeah.
Nellie, let's say, was saved at that moment, and if she wasn't, and human error had ended it, then maybe it would be a completely different outlook. So, similar to your situation, thankfully everyone's physically okay, but probably mentally scarred, which is something that hopefully moving forward can be avoided.
We have everyone's at home. Nellie's going through treatment. She's going fine. You feel like maybe coming back to a bit of normality a little bit, or
Yeah, definitely.
what was the next stage? You say you was waiting for, you're keeping the plates up and running and all of that stuff. What was?
Yeah. So at that point, it felt like we was a little bit back to normal, and then Lauren, because I was back to work more, not needing to sort of be here, there, and everywhere, up Gosh and stuff. I think she was concerned over a course of maybe 1 or 2 days with Nellie, who again didn't seem herself. Was very drowsy, tired, and I think mums know best. They're with them majority of the time. They know when they're abnormal, and again, me being Mr. Positive, I'm sure she's fine. Let's see how it goes. Speak to your local nurse and see what she thinks. And it got to a point where Nellie kind of couldn't keep awake. Her eyes were rolling in the back of her head, and I think instantly Lauren knew again that something was up. She was assigned I'm not going to be able to remember what it's called. She was assigned a particular nurse throughout the treatment who she stayed in contact with. She'd probably like sort of worked up Gosh and would share issues and problems that she had. And this was one that she raised alarm to and said, like, my daughter's not right.
Mm.
And it was a lot of backwards and forwards. Have you done this? Or have you tested for this? Have you, is she eating or doing things differently? And it got to a point where she felt like she was being unheard and kind of brushed aside. So I think at that point she basically, enough was enough, and she sort of begged that we needed to go back up to Gosh. I don't think they necessarily wanted us to go up there, but Lauren basically forced our way to get back up there.
Yeah.
And it was instantly, I think I came back from work, rushed home, got in the car, and she said, like, to the nurse up at Gosh, like, we're coming, like, we're on our way, even though they kind of didn't want us to come for whatever reason. I don't know, protocol, or they were busy or booked. And we got there, and within minutes we very fortunately bumped into one of the consultants that has worked with Nellie throughout the chemo, and straight away knew that something wasn't right. And probably without him being there or crossing paths, we may have just been sent back home. And they straight away did a test on her, and it had proven that she'd relapsed in her brain. There was a couple of tumours that had appeared.
So the cancer come back.
Yeah, cancer was back.